Topic here is bio and Nazis using the reading from class. Remember, there was a task in class where students were placed in a group and given 5 minutes to complete a reading. And we were pretty much trying to simulate survival of the fittest and using some of the ideas outlined in the reading here. I'm not going to really say much about this other than it's for fifth grade girls biology class, and it's a textbook. And up here, they begin, I believe, here with the animal kingdom. They talk about predators and animals that have eyes to the side as opposed to eyes to the front. Here they talk about plants. And I just want to point out that they start with the animal kingdom, then they make a transition to plants, and then this bizarre transition that then says that people are subject to these natural laws. So you would go animal kingdom, plant kingdom. Oh, and by the way, animals can be subjected to some of these same ideas. The reading also outlined a 5-step method here, where it says, we're going to divide up the labor, and every individual from the species has a particular purpose. Basically these bullet points that are right here. We already talked about the simulation, and I'm not going to say much more about that. So for this PowerPoint, I'm pretty much going to introduce you to eugenics, euthanasia, and how the Nazis go about passing some of the laws that were going to target certain individuals throughout Germany. So in this particular slide, all I'm trying to point out is some sort of similarity on some level with regard to dog breeders and the eugenics movement. So here we have a min pin. This is a dog that has a small size, and they have certain features that qualify this particular dog for the min pin breed. So the min pins come in 3 colors. They come in chocolate, black and tan, and blue, which is actually a gray or a grayish color of a dog. So the dog weighs about 10 to 12 pounds. You wouldn't want to be underweight. You wouldn't want to be over the weight. And the dog has to have a certain size. Maybe it's about 10 inches from the ground. And so with the dog breeders, they're very concerned with making sure that a dog breed or a particular animal, individual dog, meets the breed requirement in order to qualify for being, classified as that particular breed. So dog breeders, I always look at them as some eugenics people because, a dog breeder would be very concerned about maintaining the purity of the breed. And that's pretty much why I included this particular slide here. So a brief history on eugenics. We've already been introduced to the term eugenics in a prior class. It's the manipulation of genetics to get a desired outcome. And euthanasia is a mercy killing. The Nazis would use both, but they would make this transition to euthanasia if you met the requirements. So that's kind of where this is about. So if you think euthanasia is a mercy killing, if you've ever put down one of your pets, because the pet's getting old and you feel that the pet is suffering, well, that's exactly what euthanasia is. So start here with looking at some of the figures. I'm probably not going to ask you any test questions about these individuals. So Sir Francis Galton, this individual, notice the years he's alive, and the eugenics movement really starts in the mid, to late 1800s. Anyway, he starts to look at superiority of the races and positive eugenics. So his contribution to eugenic thought is, unique races and inferior, superior races. So it's sort of a classification system. And then Herbert Spencer comes up with the, Darwin uses Darwin's ideas and says that society and politics should interfere with Darwin. So we use an example where, if somebody is, experiencing from birth a medical condition, what would that person's life be like if they were, there were no government intervention programs, how would that individual function? So his argument is ultimately that government, by its policy and laws, possibly can help somebody with a, genetic issue survive. And so he's concerned with survival of the fittest. So regardless if you have any medical condition, his question here is that the state, the society should not interfere with natural selection. Richard Dugdale, he starts looking at your contribution to society, and degeneracy. And so what they're looking at here is, you know, um, do you have that bad gene, whatever that bad gene may be, because the eugenicist would have to define what that gene is and then isolate it, try to weed it out, similar to the dog breeder. So this individual's contribution, he's advocating for, looking at people, and making a determination about, your contribution to the state. And all of these people are, you know, you know, before the Nazi time. So eugenics theory is not something the Nazis come up with. Davenport is interesting because he is a professor at Harvard. The fact that Harvard has a eugenics class should be very telling. And there's an attempt to establish a eugenics record office, which means, if we're concerned about, non-contributing members of society and identifying people, then that's probably going to be the purpose of this eugenics record office in the United States. Henry Laughlin, now things are starting to get worse. He's trying to look at the state governments and advocate for sterilization. So if you are determined to have that degenerate gene, I guess his argument would be, the state can sterilize you. Henry Goddard, what's significant about this individual is he is working on the Kallikak family, and the Kallikak family is looking at this particular family. This is the last name here, and they're trying to isolate that degenerate gene here within the family tree. So if they can determine, moron, and this would be the language, genetic moronification that they, could use. They would be looking at the family, in this case, the children, and trying to figure out where that degenerate gene, stems from. And then, of course, they'd probably advocate for sterilization. We already addressed the Buck versus Bell case, and in the Buck versus Bell case, the courts are trying to make a determination about whether or not the state can sterilize somebody. And they pretty much say right here, society can prevent those who are unfit from continuing their kind. And so what they're arguing here is that, it is not a violation of one's rights, that sterilization by the state can take place in the U.S. If we look here, I just have a list of people or types of people, and these are individuals that the Nazis would eventually go after. So what happens in Nazi Germany is not just about targeting the Jewish people. Hereditary ill, if you have any medical condition, you could be on the list. If you're an alcoholic, criminal, and the Nazis are pretty much going to develop a list and then make a determination about, who gets sterilized, who gets killed, and so on. And of course, you could have the blondest hair, bluest eyes. It's not going to matter. So how do the Nazis implement eugenic legislation? Well, it's because the Nazis do a pretty good job of controlling all three branches of government. So how do they do that? Well, it's actually through a series of laws. So in this particular slide here, it's looking at the cabinet, Hitler's cabinet. So here I put the United States Cabinet, Department of Defense, Department of Education. There was an 11 cabinet member, and when the agreement was made, when the debate about whether or not to give Hitler the chancellorship, I guess von Papen is under the assumption that if we can control this guy and put people around him, maybe we can, control this guy and, reduce Hitler's power. So here you'd see Hitler's cabinet, and he has 3 people appointed to his cabinet. So I guess the point von Papen was trying to make was, if we can somehow keep non-Nazi members, these blue cabinet members, in this 11-member cabinet, Hitler would not have that much power. So how is Hitler going to be able to target groups of people? He's going to consolidate power. And he does that through what becomes known as the Reichstag fire. The Reichstag was Germany's legislative branch of government. There was a fire that burned it down. And as a result of that, Hitler was able to implement the Enabling Act, where it says right here, you can deviate from the Constitution as long as they don't affect institutions. So pretty much what happens with the Enabling Act is when there's an emergency crisis, you can temporarily suspend the Constitution, and Hitler would take that to pretty much consolidate all of his power. It's a way to get rid of the legislative branch to the judicial branch and consolidate all of the power in the executive branch. And that would put him in a position where all eugenics laws and laws targeting groups of people can take place legally. So here we're just looking at the laws targeting Jews in Nazi Germany. Just talks about some of the things that happened where, slowly, one by one, laws targeted Jews. We start here with non-Aryans. Again, non-Aryans can't practice law, can't be National Health Service members. And before you know it, there's a transition from Aryan in the law to Jews in the law. Like here, bar Jews, so they make a transition from Aryan to Jew. They passed a law for the conservation of the purity of German blood. So when this law right here is passed, it's all about the preservation of blood. If you have any of those medical conditions that the eugenics people are advocating, targeting, then here you would have a law in place that would give the Nazis the ability to target those individuals. And that's pretty much it. Looking at the laws here, again, just more things that the Jewish people are not allowed to do. And that tells the story of the Nazi consolidation of power, as well as a brief overview on the eugenics movement in Nazi Germany.